Hey guys, thanks for coming back and joining us here at Salty Ginger Talk. Glad to have you back. So, in today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about why people are perceived as smart or intelligent. So, if you think about it, when you hear people that ask a lot of negative questions or express a lot of negative views, for some reason, as a society, as a group, as a race, human race that is, we perceive those people to be smart. Sometimes they're smart, sometimes they're not smart. With that said, it feels like the folks that are negative more often than not are perceived as more intelligent than people that are positive thinkers or express positive thoughts. So, why is that? Why is that the case? I think it's always important to kind of understand those things because not only do we want to think critically, but we need to be able to understand how other people perceive the world if we're going to get them to open their minds and join us in thinking more logically, more left brained, more critically. And so, what is it about the negativity that makes people give those people more weight, more credence, more consideration than people who express positive thoughts and positive outlooks? So, why is that? So, there is a psychological phenomenon called negativity bias. And what happens there is our brains, when you think about it, our brains are about 2 million years old, at least the way the brain functions now. It's been functioning this way for a long time. And we were in nature just like any other animal for a long time. And so you had to look out for threats. A saber-toothed tiger was a problem. Whatever predator or potential deathly experience waited out there, slip and fall from a cliff, getting stuck in a bog and sucked down and drown into the tar pits. Those were threats. And so your brain was developed to look for threats, to look for bad things. And so we give greater weight to negative things kind of instinctually than we do to positive things. And this doesn't just relate to physical danger, it relates to critical or skeptical viewpoints, right? Because if you're on a trail, let's say you're in a group and you're on a trail and you're a caveman, whatever, 200,000 years ago, and you've got to go this way or this way, and someone says, I think it's bad that way, you're going to give that weight because it might cost you your life if you pick the wrong way on this trail and wind up one of those scenarios we were talking about earlier. So it's not just the physical dangers that are perceived this way. Negative or critical viewpoints are often thought of this way because they seem more insightful or more intelligent, even if they aren't. Even if they aren't based on fact, even if they aren't based on some additional information that you're not aware of, even if it's just somebody's instinct for whatever reason, uh, we place our brains place more weight on those negative thoughts, those critical thoughts, than they do on positive thoughts. So, what are some things to think about as it relates to negativity bias? Because it's not bad to have negativity bias. It's not bad to consider the downsides to things. But first, like we talked about, this is an evolutionary thing. This is something that helped our ancestors stay alive in the rough and tumble real world where they didn't have tools or houses or heat or cars or things to take care of. It was you against nature. And so paying more attention to potential threats, negative stimuli, helped our ancestors survive. So there's that. And don't sleep on that because that's a very strong drive inside most people, the drive to live, the drive to survive, the drive to avoid pain, the drive to keep yourself safe. So it's very difficult to overcome those things. It's very difficult to overcome that thought process. And it's not even bad. I just want to be clear about that. It's not bad to have negative thoughts or think about downside or think about risk. It becomes problematic when we put more credence on those ideas when they don't deserve more credence. There are times where they do deserve more credence. Hey, we shouldn't run into the burning building. That's good where it's good. That's a time where it's good to be negative. I don't think we should do X, Y, or Z without any basis for that opinion. Like you can consider it, but we shouldn't give that opinion any more credence, any more value, or think it's smarter or better thought out simply because it's negative. So that's one thing to think about. Information processing. So in many instances, negative information requires more cognitive processing than positive information. If something's good, if something makes you happy, if something feels good, you don't have to think a lot about it. It just kind of happens. Now, there's a lot of hidden dangers out there in the world. And in the prehistoric world or the pre civilized world, there was certainly many more instances or negative experiences that could be lurking that you didn't necessarily see. So when you processing those negative thoughts or those negative opinions or those negative viewpoints, many times required deeper cognitive thinking. So it gives the perception of deeper thought. Now remember, that could be true, it could not be true, but there is this negativity bias, and so we tend to give a lot of credence to negative thoughts or negative opinions. And it can be problematic if we allow it to scare us away or stop us from taking intelligent risks or calculated risks that could lead us to a really good spot. So there's that. When someone expresses a negative opinion, it can be interpreted as a sign of critical thinking or careful analysis, even when it's not always the case. So just as a society, we tend to place value for the reasons we've talked about on contrarian negative opinions. Now, it's very interesting. If you think back to COVID, that was one of the things that people that were in charge that wanted you just to do what they told you, shut your mouth and do what they told you, tried to eliminate. They wanted to eliminate naysayers. They wanted to eliminate dissenting opinions. They wanted to eliminate debate and discussion. And the reason they wanted to do that is because they knew people would give credence to it. And it turns out there should have been credence given to some of it. When you look at the studies that are out now, 4 years after the COVID outbreak and kind of the thick of the pandemic, which I would consider from really January of 20 through, call it August or September of 20, because we had plenty of information at that point. It was just withheld from us and not shared with us as freely as the propaganda that was fed to us. Masking did not prevent much, if any, spread of COVID. There's just study after study that shows it had nothing to do with it. Keeping kids out of school, completely unnecessary. There was not thousands of children, healthy children, that died of COVID. It just didn't happen. It was just false. There's been plenty of evidence now to show that the 6 feet, stay 6 feet from people. There's absolutely nothing that is scientifically based that made that 6 foot conclusion. It just doesn't exist. If I'm wrong, show it to me. Like, absolutely show it to me. But you look at it now, and what we're talking about, this negativity bias, really makes a lot more sense. They did not want people expressing other opinions because it made it harder for them to control the population. And that's what it was, control. It's very interesting. When you talk to people about called slavery, we talk to people about the Holocaust. If I had been in Nazi Germany, I would have been a dissenter. If I had been around in the 1800s, I would have been an abolitionist. Well, I watched plenty of people that really took glee in reporting people who violated these so-called rules. They're not wearing a mask at the grocery store. They have more than 10 people at their house. There were hotlines that were set up and people were happily calling and reporting their neighbors. I bet if you asked those same people, would you have been an abolitionist? Oh, I'd have been an abolitionist. Really? Would you? Because your behavior doesn't say that to me. So it's that negative opinion that they were afraid of because they knew people would listen to it, because there's a negative, like we've talked about, the negativity bias. We consider negative opinions in many instances to carry more weight, more credence, be better thought out than positive thoughts. When negativity bias exists, it doesn't mean that that person is inherently smarter, that they've spent more time working through the problem, that they have information that you don't have, on which they're basing their comments or their opinions. It doesn't mean anything. It just means it's their opinion that they're expressing. But remember, like we've talked about, because there is this negativity bias that exists in hardwired in our brain from our ancestors, many times we think people that express these thoughts and opinions are smarter. They might be. I'm not saying they're not smarter. Maybe they are smarter or better educated or more informed in a particular instance. But there's no guarantee that simply because they're expressing a negative opinion that it's better thought out, that it's better reasoned out, that they've spent more time thinking through it, that they've got better information than you do. So don't just acquiesce to someone because they're negative and they have a strong opinion. It's not a good way to go. They could be right. They could not be right. Don't let it affect your critical thinking process. Don't let it stop you from thinking through things. Using the COVID example, right? So it was very difficult for COVID to be transmitted outside. It turns out that it's much easier for it to be transmitted in a closed environment where the air is recirculated or trapped in the environment, which, when you think about it, that certainly gives way more credence to the thought that it was lab generated and it did not come from nature. Because if it came from nature, how did it transmit? Because it does not transmit well outside. It does not transmit well outdoors. So if it's naturally occurring, how was it that it spread all across the world? It does not make a lot of sense when you stop and think about it critically. But you've got to get past the propaganda and past the brainwashing and the negativity that was used to kind of hammer these ideas home with people. Now, the perception of intelligence can vary depending on the situation and the way negativity is expressed. So when you think about the naysayers to COVID, there was this groundswell of people that were afraid of COVID. They were afraid, and I get it. Like it was legit. It's a real virus. Millions of people died from contracting COVID. Totally got it. I'm not denying that for a second. When you look at the vast majority of people that died, they had other health comorbidities that contributed to their death. There was very few healthy, normally functioning people who died from COVID. Did it happen? Of course it happened. The same thing can happen with the flu. The same thing can happen with tuberculosis. There's lots of other respiratory diseases that could impact you the same way COVID did. But when you look at the data, almost no one, on a percentage basis, almost no one that died of COVID was healthy and strong and just dropped dead. Like, did it happen? Sure, it happened, but it was exceedingly rare. And so when you think about the negativity bias that was applied to that, they did not want people who wanted to bring those facts up to have a platform. They did not want that idea expressed because they wanted to be able to keep control over the population. And that was what they did for a long period of time because so many people just agreed to whatever. I can tell you, I never got the COVID vaccine. I never thought it made sense. It's a common cold. It's a cold virus. We've never come up with a cure for the cold. I never thought the vaccine would cure COVID. Now, it's great that it appeared to help people who were at risk from getting as severe a case of COVID, and that's great. But the way it was presented to us was take the shot. Nobody's got to, you can't transmit it to anyone anymore, and you're home free. Just not true. Just not true. That never made sense to us, never passed the eyeball test with us. So we were in the dissenting opinion the entire time. But that negativity bias really messes with people's minds. And the reason we're bringing this up is we want you to continue to maintain your critical thinking skills. Calm, rational, fact-based decisions. Don't make decisions from a place of fear because you generally don't make very good decisions when you're afraid. You let that fear cloud your judgment and you make poorer decisions than you do from a logical left brain fact-based approach. And then one last thing, we don't want to dismiss negativity because there is value in negativity. There's a difference between constructive criticism and negativity. So being able to provide thoughtful, critical feedback is valuable. But constant negativity without constructive solutions is usually not seen as a sign of intelligence. Nobody likes a whiner. Nobody likes it when you just complain and throw up your problems. So when someone is expressing a dissenting opinion or someone is expressing a negative thought and they follow it up with, here are some potential solutions, here are some potential workarounds, here are some ways we can deal with this situation that will get us to a better spot, that's probably someone that's worth taking a long, hard listen to, because that's a person who has put a lot of thought into whatever instance or situation you're discussing with them. And it's probably worth looking at those ideas because they may have uncovered some things that other people hadn't thought about, and they're bringing solutions for those things as well. So negativity, or just the fact that it's negative or contrarian, doesn't make it bad. If it's constructive, if it's well thought out, if it's fact-based, and there's solutions that come along with those same suggestions or same opinions, it's probably worth giving some merit to. So keep that in mind. So found this interesting. We dug into it a little bit. We heard a conversation about this last week and wanted to do an episode on it. So that's what we did. So hope you found it as interesting as we did. Thanks for coming back and checking out our channel, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our content on whatever platform you consume it on. You can head on over to our website, saltygingertalk.com. We've got all our podcast episodes available there. We've got links to our social media content there. And we've got a daily newsletter that we publish weekdays that you can subscribe to on our website. So thanks again for coming back, guys. Really appreciate you checking out our channel. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time.